My name is Lily. I'm 28 years old. And on the morning I finally opened the door to my own bakery, the only person who showed up from my family was my brother. 6 hours late, asking me to sign over half of everything I'd built. But before I tell you what happened next, like and subscribe and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. I read every single one. The smell of cinnamon rolls and brown butter hit you the second you stepped through the door. I had been in that kitchen since 4 in the morning. I had proofed the dough overnight, piped the cream cheese frosting while the sky outside was still black, and arranged the pastry case with the kind of care most people reserve for things far more important than bread. But this wasn't just bread to me. This was 7 years of my life, standing behind a glass case on the corner of Elm and 3rd, finally real. I had named it Lily's. Simple, mine. If you had told me 5 years ago that I would one day own a bakery, I would have laughed. Not because I didn't want it, but because wanting things in my family was a luxury that had never quite extended to me. I grew up learning very early that there were two kinds of children in our house. The kind whose dreams were celebrated, and the kind whose dreams were noted, appreciated in the most abstract sense, and then used as a benchmark to explain why someone else deserved more. My brother was the first kind. I was the second. He was 3 years older than me, and from the time we were small, the architecture of our family was built around him. Not in a way that anyone would have ever admitted out loud. My parents were not cruel people. They were the kind of people who believed they were being fair even as the scales tipped, year after year, so consistently in one direction that eventually fair stopped being a word that applied to our household at all. I remember being 11 years old and winning a regional essay contest at school. The prize was a $25 gift card and a certificate that got framed and hung in the hallway at the school. My teacher called the house to tell my mother. I sat at the kitchen table listening to my mom's side of the conversation, my heart thumping. When she hung up, she turned to me and said, "Good job, sweetheart," the way you say it when someone holds the door open for you. Then she called my grandmother to tell her my brother had made the varsity basketball team as a sophomore. I smiled. I said nothing. I learned. My brother was not a bad person. He was just someone who had been told his entire life that the world owed him a soft landing, and he believed it, the way you believe things. You've never had reason to question. He didn't work particularly hard, but he had a charm about him. An easy laugh that made everyone want to be in the room with him. My parents looked at him and saw potential. They looked at me and saw capability, which sounds like a compliment, but mostly meant that I was the one who didn't need anything because I would figure it out. I always figured it out. I worked my first job at 15, hostessing at a chain restaurant on Friday and Saturday nights. My parents drove my brother to practice on those same nights. I took the bus. By the time I was a junior in high school, I was paying for my own clothes, my own school supplies, and quietly helping with the electric bill during the months my dad's hours got cut at the warehouse. I didn't tell anyone I was doing it. It felt like it would only cause problems. When it came time for college, my parents sat me down and explained carefully and with great sincerity that money was just very tight right now. I understood. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I got into a state school with a partial academic scholarship and worked 2 jobs to cover the rest. I studied nutrition science because I wanted to eventually open a food business, a plan my mother responded to with a slight tilt of her head and the phrase, "Well, if that's what makes you happy." My brother started college the same year I did. His tuition, housing, and spending money were covered entirely by my parents, a fact I only learned when I found the FAFSA forms on the kitchen table one afternoon during winter break. When I asked about it, my father explained that my brother needed more support. "You've always been so self-sufficient, Lily. He just needs a little more time to find himself." He found himself for 8 years. I graduated in 4. I moved to a different city. I got a job at a commercial bakery, then a smaller artisan shop where I learned everything about sourdough and laminated doughs and the chemistry of a perfect croissant. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with a faulty radiator and a window that faced a parking garage. Every month, I transferred money into a savings account I had labeled simply the plan. I didn't go on vacations. I didn't buy new furniture. I ate a lot of rice and whatever I brought home from the bakery at the end of the day. Every few months, my phone would ring. It was usually my mother with that particular tone in her voice, the one that started soft and got heavier as the conversation went on. "Your brother is going through a hard time. He's between jobs, between apartments, between girlfriends, between semesters, because he had switched his major 3 times. Could I help out a little, just until things stabilized? I always said yes. I always transferred the money, somewhere between $200 and $1,000, depending on the ask, depending on how much was in my account at the time. He never paid any of it back. I never asked him to. I had learned that asking caused problems. 2 years ago, I found the space. It was a narrow little storefront that had been a florist's shop for 20 years and still faintly smelled like roses and wet soil beneath the fresh paint. The lease was manageable. The kitchen needed work. I spent 6 months doing most of that work myself, watching tutorials, borrowing tools, learning things I never thought I would know about plumbing and electrical panels. I applied for a small business loan and got it. I put the entire balance of the plan account toward the build-out. I hired one part-time employee, a college student named Priya, who had answered my Craigslist ad with a message that said she would work for free if I taught her to make croissants. I paid her properly, but I did teach her to make croissants. I set the opening date for the second Saturday in March. I sent the invitations a month in advance. Cards with the logo I had designed myself, a simple line drawing of a lily inside a coffee cup. I mailed them. Physical cards in envelopes with stamps. My parents, my brother and his girlfriend, my aunt, my cousin who lived 40 minutes away. I followed up with texts. Everyone confirmed. My mother said, "We're so proud of you, Lily. We wouldn't miss it for anything." My brother texted back a single thumbs up emoji and, after I sent a follow-up, "Wouldn't miss it. Big day." The morning of, I was at the bakery by 4. Priya came in at 5. We moved in a kind of synchronized quiet, pulling trays from the ovens, filling the pastry case, grinding the first batches of coffee. By 8, the front of the shop was lit and warm, the windows slightly fogged from the heat inside, the sidewalk quiet in the pale March light. I had tied a small bundle of dried lavender to the door handle. I had placed a handwritten welcome sign on the chalkboard by the register. I had reserved the table near the window for my family, the one with the best light. At 9, the door opened for the first time. My first customer was a man walking a dog, who bought a plain coffee and a ham and cheese croissant and said, "This place is exactly what this neighborhood needed." I was so grateful I almost cried. By 10, there was a small line. Regulars from the surrounding blocks who had watched the build-out through the window for months. A few people who had found me on Instagram. A woman who said a friend had texted her about the opening. I was behind the counter, moving fast, talking to people, watching the counter, moving fast, talking to people, watching the pastry case slowly empty. My face hurt from smiling. It was a good hurt. At 10:30, I checked my phone for the first time since opening. No messages, no texts. I sent a quick note to the family group thread. "We're open, come whenever," and added a photo of the full pastry case. At 11, the table by the window was still empty. At 11:45, my mother sent a message to the group chat. It was a video. I tapped it with my thumb, and the screen filled with confetti and noise. The video was shakily filmed in what looked like a banquet room at a hotel. Round tables with white tablecloths, a banner that read, "Congratulations, graduate," stretched across the back wall, and standing under it, my brother, in a cap and gown, his arm around his girlfriend, beaming. My father's voice came through the audio, laughing, saying something I couldn't fully make out. My aunt was in the background clapping. My cousin was recording on her own phone. My brother had, after 8 years, graduated, and the entire family had gathered for a surprise celebration luncheon at a hotel 40 minutes away. The same 40 minutes away where my cousin lived. My cousin who had confirmed she was coming to my opening, the same morning, the same hours, the same people who had said wouldn't miss it. I stood behind the counter of my bakery with my phone in my hand and read the caption my mother had typed under the video. "So proud of our boy. He did it. Family first, always. Heart emoji, heart emoji, heart emoji." I looked up. A woman was waiting patiently at the register with a $5 bill and a question about whether the almond croissants were made with real almond paste. I put my phone in my apron pocket. I told her yes. I made the paste myself. I rang her up. I smiled. I handed her a paper bag. I said, "I hope you love it." And then I walked to the back kitchen, stood over the sink, and breathed very slowly for about 90 seconds. Priya appeared in the doorway. She looked at my face. She didn't ask. She just said, "I've got the counter. Take whatever time you need." She was 20 years old and she already understood more about loyalty than anyone in that hotel banquet room. I washed my hands. I went back out. I worked the rest of the lunch rush because the bakery was full of people who had actually shown up, strangers who were becoming customers, customers who might one day become regulars, and none of them deserved to see me fall apart. The call started at 2 in the afternoon. I was wiping down the counter when my phone buzzed in my apron. My brother's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer. I don't know what I was hoping for. Maybe an apology, maybe an explanation that made any kind of sense. I swiped to accept. "Hey," he said. His voice was loose and warm, the voice of someone who had been celebrating for several hours. "Big day, huh? How'd it go?" "The opening went well," I said. My voice was flat. "A lot of people came." "That's awesome. That's really great." He paused. "Hey, so listen. I'm actually glad you picked up, because I wanted to run something by you." He cleared his throat. "So I've been thinking about doing something in the food space. Like a food truck, or maybe a small restaurant. Something casual. And you've already done all this work to get established and get the loan and everything. So I was thinking, and Mom and Dad actually think this is a great idea. What if we went into it together? Like, you add me on as a co-owner of Lily's. It would help me qualify for my own loan down the line, because I'd have the business history. It wouldn't change anything about how you run it. It would just be on paper." The counter I was wiping was very clean. I wiped it again. "Just on paper," I said. "Exactly. Like, you'd still be running everything. I just need the documentation for the bank. You want me to make you a co-owner of my bakery so you can use my business to get a loan? I mean, when you say it like that, on the day of my grand opening." There was a beat of silence. "Look, I know the timing is. I was going to bring it up later, but I figured, while you had me, I repeated. Lily, come on, don't make this weird. It's just paperwork." I looked around my bakery. At the chalkboard menu I had lettered by hand at 11 o'clock at night 3 weeks ago, at the small framed photo of my grandmother, my mother's mother, hanging near the register, because she had once made a lemon cake that I had spent 15 years trying to replicate. At the empty table by the window with a good light. "No," I said. "What?" "No, I'm not doing that." His tone shifted. The looseness was gone. "I'm not asking you to do anything crazy. I just need to be listed as co-owner of a business you didn't build, didn't fund, didn't lose sleep over, and didn't show up to support on the day it opened." I stopped. "Because you were at a party. For yourself." "That's not fair. I didn't even know Mom was planning that." "She surprised me. You texted me 3 days ago and said you wouldn't miss it." He didn't answer that. He exhaled instead, slow and deliberate, the sound of someone recalibrating. "You know what? I'm going to have Dad call you. You'll listen to him." My father called 4 minutes later. "Lily." His voice was measured, reasonable. The voice he used when he thought the situation just required a calm adult to explain things clearly. "I hear there's some confusion about what your brother is asking." "There's no confusion," I said. "I understand exactly what he's asking. Then you understand it's a minor thing, a technicality. It costs you nothing. It costs me co-ownership of my business, on paper, temporarily, until he gets his footing. You know how he is. He just needs a little support," I said. "I know. He always needs a little support, and I always provide it. And somehow I am still the one sitting here having this conversation, while everyone who said they were coming to my opening today is at a hotel 40 minutes away, eating cake for my brother." My father was quiet for a moment. "We'll talk about that. There were some miscommunications." "What was miscommunicated?" "I sent physical invitations. I followed up. Everyone confirmed." "Lily." He sighed, the sigh of a man who had decided I was being emotional. "I know you worked hard on this, and we are proud of you. But your brother just accomplished something huge. 8 years is a long road. He deserves to be celebrated." Something turned over in my chest. Very slowly, very quietly, So do I, Dad. He paused. I have been working toward this for 7 years, I said. My voice was steady. I was surprised by how steady it was. I did it without help. I did it while still sending money to you and Mom every time things got tight. I did it while watching all of you celebrate every minor thing he did and treat every major thing I did as simply expected. And today was supposed to be my day. And you all decided his graduation party, the third graduation party, by the way, because you threw him one when he finally declared a major and another when he completed his first 60 credits, was more important. That is not, and now I'm being asked, today, to hand him a piece of what I built so he can use it to get money. Silence. My answer is no, I said. Don't call me back about this today. I'm working. I ended the call. Priya was standing at the edge of the counter looking at me with wide eyes. Are you okay? She asked. Yes, I said. Can you start on the second tray of snickerdoodles? She nodded immediately and disappeared into the kitchen, the perfect employee, the perfect human being, and I stood at the register and served the next 3 customers with a smile that I had to rebuild from nothing but that I built anyway. Because the bakery was still open and the people in it deserved my full attention. They came at 4 o'clock. I heard my mother's voice before I saw her, that particular bright quality it had when she was performing happiness for a public setting. The door swung open and they came in together. My mother, my father, my brother and his girlfriend, still dressed from the luncheon. My brother was carrying his diploma in a cardboard tube. My mother spread her arms. Surprise! We made it! She was holding a small bouquet of grocery store flowers, the kind wrapped in cellophane. Better late than never, right? Oh, Lily, it's so cute in here. Isn't it cute? My father looked around with the expression of a man doing a property assessment. My brother hung back near the door. He wouldn't quite meet my eyes. I was behind the counter. I put down the cloth I was holding. Hi, I said. Don't be like that. My mother set the flowers on the counter and began looking around. We're here, aren't we? We wanted to see the place. Your father says you had a good turnout this morning. That's wonderful. Can we sit down? She was already moving toward the table by the window, the one I had reserved. You can sit anywhere that's open, I said. She turned and gave me a look, the light, slightly wounded look she deployed whenever she sensed resistance. Lily. I'm at work, I said. What can I get for you? My father stepped forward and placed his hands flat on the counter. Let's not do this here. Your brother wants to talk to you about the idea. I already told him no. You told him no before you fully understood. I understand completely. Lily. My mother's voice had dropped. The performance softened. We came all the way here. Can we just sit and talk like a family? My brother finally spoke. Look, I get that you're upset about this morning, and I'm sorry about the timing. But this doesn't have to be a whole thing. I'm not asking to take anything from you. You're asking to put your name on my business so you can borrow money against it. His girlfriend shifted uncomfortably. She had the look of someone who had been told on the drive over that this would be simple and was now realizing it would not be. It's called leveraging existing assets, my father said. It's a perfectly normal business practice. It's my asset, I said. I built it. My name is on the license. My credit score is attached to the loan. My hands did the work. And we're your family, my mother said, her voice taking on that softer, more plaintive quality. We raised you, Lily. We gave you everything we had. The words landed in a way she probably didn't intend. I looked at her for a moment. You gave me what you had after you gave him what he needed, I said quietly. You sent me to college on scholarships and 2 jobs. You bought him his first car and paid his tuition and funded 4 years of him figuring himself out at an out-of-state school. I don't say this to hurt you. I say it because it's true, and I think on some level you know it is. My mother's face crumpled. The tears came quickly, the way they always did when the conversation stopped going her way. How can you say something like that? After everything. After everything, my brother cut in, his voice harder now, the charm gone. You really want to stand there and act like you've had it so hard? Nobody stopped you from doing any of this. Nobody helped me either, I said. We're here right now. Doesn't that count? I picked up the flowers she had set on the counter. I held them for a second. They were carnations, pink and white, still rubber banded together. They probably cost $4. They were the only gift anyone in my family had ever brought to anything that was mine. I appreciate you coming, I said. I mean that, but I am not adding anyone to this business. I am not signing anything, and I'm not having this conversation while I'm trying to close up for the day. I set the flowers back down gently. You're welcome to order something. Coffee, pastries, whatever you'd like, it's on me. But I need my answer to stand. My father pulled himself up. You have embarrassed this family by making a simple, reasonable request into some kind of dramatic production. I didn't make it anything, I said. I just said no. He shook his head, the slow, disappointed shake I had seen 100 times, the one that always made me want to apologize even when I had done nothing wrong. This time, it didn't work. I watched it happen, and I felt nothing crack. My brother looked at me one last time. I could see the calculation in his expression, the reassessment. He had grown up, understanding that I would eventually comply, that after a period of pushback, I would smooth things over and find some version of yes. He was realizing in real time that this time the math was different. Fine, he said. He tapped the cardboard tube holding his diploma against his palm twice. Don't call me when you need something. I never have, I said. They left. My brother's girlfriend mouthed, I'm sorry, as she went through the door. I nodded at her. The door closed. Priya stood in the kitchen doorway for the second time that day, a dish towel in her hands, her expression careful and kind. I'm fine, I said. I know, she said. But just in case, I had a cinnamon roll for you in the back. The really good one from this morning. I knew this day was going to be long. I laughed. It startled me, how real it felt. The text came that night. My mother first, then my father, then my brother, then relatives I hadn't spoken to in months, who had apparently been briefed on the situation and recruited to explain to me how unreasonable I was being. My aunt wrote that family forgives. My cousin wrote that I was making a mountain out of a molehill, someone I barely remembered. A second cousin from my father's side sent a voice memo telling me that when you're successful, you have to remember where you came from. I read each message once. I put my phone down. I went and sat on the floor of my kitchen, which was clean and smelled like dish soap. And I let myself feel everything I had been holding together since 9 in the morning when the first customer walked through the door. I cried for probably 20 minutes. Not quietly, the way you cry when you're trying to be composed, but ugly, the way you cry when you have been strong all day in front of strangers and you are finally alone. When it was done, I got up. I washed my face. I brewed a small pot of chamomile tea, and I sat at my kitchen table and made a list. The list was practical. I called a small business attorney the next morning. I went over my business license, my loan documents, my lease. I made sure every piece of paperwork was in order, and that there was no mechanism by which my name could be removed or another added without my explicit written consent. The attorney, a woman about 15 years older than me, who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and looked at me with a kind, tired professionalism, told me my instincts were correct and my documents were solid. She also said, without my prompting, you were right to say no. I changed the password on my business account. I started a formal paper trail for every financial decision. Small steps, methodical. I was building walls the way I had built everything else. One layer at a time, by myself, in the early hours when no one was watching. I did not block my family right away. That decision came more slowly, more painfully. For 2 weeks, I muted the threads and read nothing. Then one evening, after a particularly long shift, I sat down with my phone and scrolled back through months of messages. What I found there was a record I recognized. The pattern of asking, the language of obligation, the way my name appeared most often in the context of need. I appeared very rarely in the context of celebration. I blocked them, one by one, not in anger, but in exhaustion. The way you finally close a window that has been letting in cold air for years because you've accepted that closing it doesn't mean the weather outside changes. It just means you stop being cold. The quiet that followed was enormous. My phone went from a source of low-grade dread to a neutral object again. I would pick it up to set a timer for bread proofing. I would use it to respond to customer comments on Instagram. I would text Priya about schedules and supplies. The difference was staggering. The bakery grew in the quiet. Word of mouth worked slowly, and then all at once. By the end of the first month, I had regulars, not just people who came occasionally, but people I could recognize by their orders. The older man who came every Tuesday for a plain croissant and an Americano and sat in the corner reading a physical newspaper. The mother who brought her daughter every Saturday for a chocolate milk and a jam thumbprint cookie. A group of nurses from the hospital 2 blocks over who started ordering a dozen assorted pastries every Friday morning for their unit. And there was my neighbor Carla, who owned the florist shop 2 doors down, and who, it turned out, had bought this exact space 20 years ago and filled it with flowers until her lease ran out. She started coming in every morning for a lavender latte, and she was the funniest person I had ever met in my life. She had opinions about everything. Politics, footwear, the correct way to arrange a centerpiece, and she delivered them all with such cheerful certainty that arguing with her felt both pointless and deeply enjoyable. She became my first real friend in the neighborhood. It was Carla who organized the second attempt at a proper opening celebration. "You never got your party," she said one morning, matter of fact, setting her coffee down. "So we're having one, Saturday. I'll bring flowers, obviously." Priya said she'd come in early to bake extra. That hospital nurse, the tall one, Danielle, she said she'd bring wine. "You don't do anything. You just show up to your own bakery, which I understand you do every day, but this time in a nicer shirt." "You don't have to do that," I said. "I know I don't have to," she said, putting on her coat. "I want to. There's a difference. You should learn to notice it." Saturday came. Priya had baked an extra sheet of rosewater shortbread. Carla arrived with an enormous arrangement of peonies and set them on the counter without asking where they should go. Danielle from the hospital came with 2 bottles of Prosecco and a card signed by her entire unit that said, "From the nurses who eat your croissants every Friday. Thank you for existing." The newspaper man was there, having been informed by Carla in a way I was never fully told about. The Saturday mother came with her daughter, who had made me a drawing of a lily in crayon that I taped behind the register. We pushed the tables together near the window. Carla put on a playlist from her phone that was 80% Fleetwood Mac and 20% things she described as vibes. The Prosecco was poured into the mismatched glasses I had bought at a thrift store when I furnished the place. Priya leaned on the counter eating rosewater shortbread and laughing at something Danielle said. I looked at the room. The peonies were enormous and slightly ridiculous on the counter. The newspaper man was showing Carla's phone to the Saturday mother, as if they had known each other for years. The little girl's crayon lily was taped crookedly behind my register, and it was the most important piece of art I owned. Danielle raised her glass. She had the comfortable authority of someone who had spent years managing small crises and had learned that ceremony mattered. "To Lily," she said, "and lilies, for being here." We clinked glasses. The Prosecco was cheap and a little sweet. "And to the people who didn't come to her opening," Carla added, completely straight-faced. "More croissants for us." I laughed until I had to put my glass down. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from growing up in a family that loves you in theory, but never quite learns to see you in practice. It has a specific texture, that loneliness. It is not the sharp, clean loneliness of being alone. It is the duller, more confusing loneliness of being surrounded by people who look at you and consistently see something other than what you are. I had lived inside that specific loneliness for so long that for a while I thought it was just the shape of things, the way family worked, the price of being the capable one. I know better now. I still think about them sometimes, not often, but honestly. I wonder if my brother ever opened his restaurant. I wonder if my mother found another number to call when things got tight. I wonder if my father ever had a moment of clarity, the kind that arrives quietly in the early hours that made him reconsider the accounting of his own household. I don't wish them harm. I don't think about them with anger. I think about them the way you think about a version of yourself you used to be, with a kind of fond, slightly sorrowful distance. A few months ago, an email got through from my mother. It was short. She said she hoped I was well. She said she missed me. She said she had been thinking about me. She did not say she was sorry. She did not acknowledge the opening she had missed, or the request she had been part of, or the years of one-way obligation that had preceded it. She said she hoped I would reach out when I was ready. I read it twice. I closed it. I went back to work. The lemon blueberry scone I had been developing for 3 weeks finally came together that afternoon. The ratio of lemon zest to butter was exactly right. The blueberries held their shape. I brought one out to Carla when she came in for her afternoon coffee, and she took one bite and said, without looking up, "This is the one. This goes on the permanent menu." I went back behind the counter. I added it to the chalkboard in my best printing. I thought about my grandmother's lemon cake. I thought about the girl who had spent her Saturdays on buses to get to work so she could save enough to build something that was entirely hers. I looked around at what that something had become. My mother's last words to me, spoken in the context of the family she believed I was foolishly throwing away, were about loneliness. She thought she was predicting my future. She had no way of knowing that what she was describing was my past. The long, patient loneliness of being in a room full of people who would not see me. What I have now is smaller. A florist 2 doors down who brings me flowers for no reason. A part-time employee who saved me a cinnamon roll on the hardest morning of the year. A nurse who organized a party I didn't ask for. A little girl's crayon drawing taped behind my register. It is the smallest, quietest, most complete life I have ever known. And every morning when I unlock that door, alone in the dark, before the city has quite woken up. Every morning I breathe in that smell of cinnamon and brown butter and warm bread rising. I think the same thing. I built this. I showed up for me. If you've ever been the capable one, the reliable one, the one who figured it out while everyone else was celebrated just for trying, hit like, subscribe, and tell me your story in the comments. Because sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is stop waiting for the people who said they were coming and open the door anyway.